All right, we are working on the executive desk build today. All right, I'm gonna start by veneering up these panels, so I need to create some shop sawn veneers. But first, we need to get rid of this plywood. All right, so I'm gonna cut these guys down just because my shop is too small to have these full sheets laying around. So I'm gonna cut these guys down and then we'll get busy shop sawing the veneer. All right, now these guys are 3/8 inch thick panels and I want my finished panels to be 5/8 inch. So we're gonna shop saw the veneer down to 1/8 of an inch to get my 5/8 inch thickness. All right, so I got all my material cut to length. Now before I start resawing, I'm going to take the time to square up my material and make sure I joint and plane all the faces to where they're nice, good, and square. Because once I slice off this thin slice of veneer, to try to joint and clean up an edge on something that thin is a little bit dangerous and precarious. So I'm going to take the time now to make sure I joint the edges really nice and tight, so that way once I resaw them and go to tape them together, I'll have very little cleanup to do and hopefully they'll all fit nice and tight together without any additional work. So I'm gonna get these guys jointed up, and then once those edges are jointed, I'm gonna handle them with kid gloves to protect them, and we'll get resawing. All right, so my final thickness that I want for my veneer is going to be 1/8 of an inch to give me the thickness I want my panel to be at. So I am going to go just a tiny bit more than 1/8 of an inch, maybe a 64th or a 32nd of an inch more than 1/8 of an inch, because this blade, of course, isn't as smooth as like a table saw blade or something like that. So there's going to be some planing and cleanup to do when I'm done. All right, when setting up the feather board, I want to make sure that I'm not past the blade, because if it's past the blade, as the material passes through there, it can be push the material into the blade, pinching it, causing it harder to push the cut through, or causing the cut to get off track, or worst case, stall the blade, or I guess worst case that I slip through and hurt myself. So I'm going to stay just to the front of the blade. All right, now ideally I'd want the feather board to go all the way up to the top of the board, or at least as high as the fence to keep even pressure all the way across there, but I don't have one of those. I'm waiting for the mag switch sponsorship to come through. Hint, hint, mag switch. So at least I have good contact pressure against the bottom of the fence, and then I can focus the rest of my time just in the center of the board, making sure I'm staying tight to the fence. All right, when I start my cut, I'm going to ease into the blade. I'm not going to push real hard into the blade because that could cause the blade to deflect, and then all of a sudden I'm not cutting a nice clean straight line. So I'm just going to ease into it and let it start itself before I start applying any kind of pressure. And I won't put much pressure in until I'm past the back of the blade. So that way it'll guarantee me that this blade is tracking straight in the kerf and I didn't do anything to get it off it. All right, hopefully this is showing up on camera and you can see those little ridges there left over by the bandsaw. All right, so I have the jointer set to take a really shallow pass because we need to get rid of those bandsaw marks. And I have it just set super shallow so I can just take a couple of light passes because I want to try to preserve as much material as I can to get the best yield I can out of this board. And so after each slice off at the bandsaw, I'm going to come back and clean that face up and then resaw again. So that way when I go to send my veneer through the drum sander, I always have a nice flat clean face to reference against when I send it through to get rid of the saw marks that are left behind on the opposing side of the veneer. So that's the basic setup, resaw, flatten the board, resaw again, flatten the board. But since I milled all these to about the same thickness, I'm going to resaw all of them, flatten the boards, all of them at the same time, and then I'll reset my feather board to the new thickness and resaw them all again. That way I make best use of my time. All right, so I got all my pieces laid out and I checked to make sure all the joints were nice and tight. If any of them weren't tight, I just kind of touched them up carefully at the joiner. 1/8 inch thick material is still doable at the joiner, just you want to move really slow. All right, so I've seen a lot of guys use blue tape to tape their seams when veneering, and I don't do that. I've had some problems with using blue tape, especially on woods like veneer where it's a very straight grain. Once the vacuum bag presses that blue tape into the wood and then you go to peel it off, I've had it peel off little thin strands of the wood grain, so it just creates a lot of extra sanding. So I stay away from the blue tape, maybe just to tape it down on the corners just to help me get it into the bag, or if I need some extra help taping the back side together temporarily, I'll use blue tape. But otherwise, I just still go with the traditional route and use a water activated paper tape. And that way, in theory, when you use the water activated paper tape, when the water dries, it shrinks a little and helps keep the seam nice and tight. So that's basically my preferred system for veneering. All right, so make sure these two meet up nice and tight. I'm gonna pull off a little piece here, and this has a little sponge and water bottle in it to wet the tape as I go. I'm gonna put it on one side and then pull the together tight. Stitch together and basically just pinch it with my fingers. If I can't pinch the seam tight with my fingers, I did a bad job jointing the edges. I'm going to make sure I get the ends here real good coverage with the tape, because when we flip it over, I want to be able to tip it up and run a bead of glue down there, and sometimes it'll rip on that front edge, so I want to make sure I'm good and tight. See, just like it did. Trying to demonstrate. Just working my way along. Like I said, if I can't pull it tight with my fingers, I probably need to rejoint that section. I'm just going to stitch it down here, make sure I have good coverage. And do one down the middle to act kind of as a hinge. All right, so first I am going to glue my seams. So run a bead down each seam. All right, and for the rest of it, I don't want to put any more glue on there because it'll cause the veneer to cup. So I'm going to add the glue to the substrate. right, I'm working fast because I want to do both sides at the same time to help prevent it from cupping too bad, even though my substrate's already a little bit cupped. All right, I'm just going to tape the corners here to help hold it together while I get it in the bag. All right, and this thing can be kind of a pain to get on, but I have found that once I center it on the bag, if I clip this side down once, and then clip this side down, then I can work myself back to the middle. Should untangle that. All right, so normally you'd have a board underneath your workpiece with grooves cut in it to help evacuate the air and allow it to be sucked down flat. I don't have room to store that, so I just roll my bag up when I'm done. And to help keep it flat while the glue's drying, I put these cowls down across it and clamp it down to my table, which is a torsion box, so it's nice and flat. And then I use this mesh on here that will allow all the air to be evacuated out from underneath and above it. So that way my panels end up nice and flat. All right, let's get this guy out of the bag and then we'll do the side panels. All right, with this T-shape, it makes it easy for one person to clamp it down because those parallel clamp jaws just rest on the top while you walk around to the other side to clamp the rest of it down. All right, there's several ways you can get this veneer tape off there. I used to wet it down and it scrapes right off, but spent all this time making sure we got this panel nice and flat. I don't want to add any undue moisture which could cause any kind of cupping issues. And I've invested in a drum sander, so I'm going to send it through the drum sander, and a couple of passes through there should clean that right off, and any kind of other little glue goobers that may have accidentally ended up on there during the veneer process. All right, thanks for watching. Next week we will be moving on to building the framework for the desk.